Good evening, dear friends. Greetings. Welcome back, Tümerhan.
Good evening, and greetings everyone. It is good to be with you again in this series.
Remember the days we were joking about opening a TV channel for our foundation? I think, due to this pandemic, albeit mandatorily, we now have maybe not a TV channel but better. A YouTube channel where we can reach more people with each video recording of our public lectures. And they watch our videos not only online but also whenever is suitable for them. That is so good.
Yes, it is. And we need to adapt to the necessities of our times. These digital communication platforms are the current necessities. And both as the foundation, as well as the spiritual societies in our country, we are gradually making some decisions about these necessities. And all of us, we are trying to widen our comprehensions in order to be more beneficial for our dear friends. We hope that they benefit from our videos more and more.
Alright. Let's start reading. We have said that descent of beings to the world is to encounter materials which they need among the world matter, and to utilize them. Earth, among the spheres of our solar system, is the one which has the most abundant developmental materials. These materials should be devised and arranged according to the miscellaneous needs, and to render them useful for the deeds of mankind. Beings of the plans of duty which have taken on these acts do their duties within various duty organizations assigned to the world, in accordance with their merit and power. Of course, it should be remembered that this must be in accordance with the directives coming from above. With these assistances, a great number of devices, orders and constitutions are put into effect, which are beneficial for the developments of world beings, and at the same time, of mankind who have more encompassing states. For example, occurrence of natural disasters within an order, all global states pertaining to politics, economics and sciences. And in the middle of those, all nations, states, tribes, communities that have been established with all of their secondary constitutions, are always conducted by the organs that serve within great organizations under the directive of the unitary. Therefore, conducting all communities in the world, such as nations, states and families, is connected to the above. And the purpose of these connections is to help the beings, that is, mankind, who came down to the world with the need to prepare for the intuition of the plan of duty and attaining merit for this plan, to attain their goal. Thus, every man benefits endlessly from the infinite possibilities of these establishments, most often automatically and semi-comprehendingly, by direct or indirect ways, that is, both by living within the necessities of them and by observing the others living within those necessities. Here, the meaning of automatic, we have previously explained. Mankind's benefiting from these communities does not always occur by seeing their true purposes. Almost always, mankind joins in these communities, according to their world realities and values, eagerly and willingly, only for their personal interests, and through this, wish they work with heart and soul in these communities. And the kinds of wishes vary, depending on the quality and quantity of the earthly craving components of each person. These qualities and quantities sometimes descend to the levels of selfishness which are very low. For example, a big gang of bandits can be established. However, with equilibria adapted to the higher levels of the conscience mechanism, these wishes can display very noble and high manifestations as well. For example, with a pure instinct of love, all burdens of a family can be shouldered. However, apparently no one wants to see or think the original great values of all these constitutions that will lead mankind to the superior and real benefits through paths which are sometimes very sweet and sometimes too bitter and demanding.
Yes, this phrase of descent of beings to the world is to encounter materials which they need among the world matter and to utilize them. In the first paragraph of this passage is interesting for me. We had tried explaining this as we discussed the relations of spirit being body. And this encountering materials they need occurs in the realm we call hydrogen cosmos that we currently exist and my bodies live in. Our beings concentrate and turn a material or matter combination into a vehicle to utilize for its purposes, and we call this vehicle, body. So, this word, encounter, should make us think the bodies exchanging influences. Also, at the paragraph below, there is the phrase of, these materials should be devised and arranged according to the miscellaneous needs, and to render them useful for the deeds of mankind. And also, another phrase at the next paragraph. World beings and at the same time, of mankind who have more encompassing states. Now, if we combine these two phrases, first we see that there is a necessity of meeting the needs of the world beings, rock and soil, plants and animals, virus and bacteria, of all world beings. However, the stage of human is emphasized separately. Why? Because the stage of human is stated as the last life form on this hydrogen realm matter, and because as we read in this book, after this last stage, the chance of embarking on a new stage with more comprehension, and of reaching the initial steps of the plan of duty. Therefore, we can consider this human stage as a springboard or a state of leaping to higher levels. We see this emphasis in religious books, as well, for example, in Surah Baqarah 22 of Quran. He who made for you the earth a bed, spread out. In our public lectures, many times we are asked to elaborate on this or similar expressions that make the human being stand out. And the reason is just this. Because in the human stage, the level of quality of the gains that beings can achieve is much higher than the gains they achieved at the plant and animal stages. And another point striking my attention in this passage is the phrase, automatically and semi-comprehendingly. We already read and discussed that at the stage of human, we human beings can only reach a semi-comprehending state, that is, the comprehending states begin only starting from the initial steps of plan of duty, but still, the book states that this state of semi-comprehending may gradually emerge in the stage of human, as well. Our dear friends may remember the example of a porter given in this book. On your way back home from shopping, you give the parcels to a porter to carry them to your home. Why does the porter carry them to your home? To help you? No. He does this to earn a few pennies from you. Again, we read in the divine order and the universe, humans are oriented toward a certain path of learning by mobilizing or driving them through their personal interests, and those actions they do without knowing their true meaning are called automatic actions. Again, we read here this phrase, both by living within the necessities of them and by observing the others living within those necessities. I am sure that our dear friends will remember from our previous videos that these direct and indirect ways are called stem and branch knowledge we humans gain from events. Another point is this phrase about the wishes of humans related to their personal interests. The wishes vary, depending on the quality and quantity of the earthly craving components of each person. This point requires some explanation because many questions came about this part. Alright, actually, each individual must know this. What is the criteria of the events we live and encounter in life? Well, it is our conscience. More correctly, from which side of the conscience mechanism we choose, think and act from determines the direction of the events in our life. Or, in other words, at a given time, the point we are at in the conscience mechanism, the side we are more inclined to, influences our perception of the events. Consequently, we only perceive, sense, feel, emote events from that side and give reactions with the qualities of that side. And at the paragraph, we read examples. If qualities and quantities of the conscience mechanism gets very low, that is, earthly cravings are more dominant, then selfishness emerge in humans. Or, if qualities and quantities of the conscience mechanism gets elevated to higher levels, then wishes display noble and high manifestations, such as altruism, self-sacrifice. In short, this is entirely up to our state in the conscience mechanism at a given time. Let me explain that those material interests are not bad. We don't need to get rid of such interests or make such interests inactive. Because those material interests are generally used by the higher plans to motivate humans into certain paths and choices. For example, if we consider the worldly life as a playground as some teachings suggest, well, if a kid goes there to play, will that kid willingly leave the playground? No, the kid wishes to stay and play with the toys and rides, then to play with other kids, to make friends, to spend time there as long as possible. And the kid doesn't think about what is really happening during his stay at the playground. Just as this last sentence implies. No one wants to see or think the original great values of all these constitutions that will lead mankind to the superior and real benefits through paths which are sometimes very sweet and sometimes too bitter and demanding. Yes, kids play at the playground, without thinking much about why this playground is built, without noticing how his muscles get developed or which mental activities he becomes engaged in. The kid's only wish is to have fun. In a way, our current human conditions is just like this. Because we do what we do and how we live without much comprehension, we can say that we live our life automatically in general.
Dear Tümerhan, there is a question from a friend. Does the semi-comprehending state mean to be present in the moment? I think we need to clarify this possible confusion with some explanation. What do you think?
Of course. Now, this term of semi-comprehending or semi-comprehendingly is of this book, and this is a concept different than to be present in the moment. Semi-comprehension is an interval or transition from living automatically to living with comprehension, and this is a state that can happen at the stage of human. Briefly, we can describe this state of semi-comprehension as a state of living by having an idea about the cause and effect relations, even if not completely. After all, grasping and understanding the cause and effect chains completely is a state that occurs at the plan of duty. Until the being reached the stage of human, automatism is prevalent at all the previous stages, yet, when the beings reached the stage of human, as we previously said, as an indication of the point of leap or the springboard-like function, we can talk about the semi-comprehending states.
Of course, to be present in the moment is an useful act in increasing comprehension because it takes us out of automatism. We are mostly either in the past or in the future, and unable to be in the present moment. I can say that, to be present in the moment or with the trending name given. Mindfulness practice is beneficial in increasing the awareness of the details that exist in a given moment, with the knowledge, tests and trials, perceptions, impressions a moment contains. Yes, in this passage, we read about how the wishes, based on their personal interests, driving or motivating people into certain paths. For example, our society and foundation. How all those members gathered? One by one, each of us had different motivations for attending public lectures of our elders, or for subscribing the Spirit and Matter magazine. For listening, the Meta FM radio channel. Sometimes, this motivation was just curiosity about hereafter, and sometimes, the grief about a loved one that just passed away. Sometimes, this drive was learning about astral projection, or lucid dreams we had. There are always such directing or orienting influences in each person's life. In the last few weeks, Bilyay and I named these motivating influences as carrots. I mean, this is like a carrot has been dangling in front of us, and we run after to catch it, but actually the system makes us to walk the path. That is, the end result is not catching and eating this or that carrot, but the walking the path with the desire or wish of catching the carrot. And what we do as we walk the path that extends in the worldly life? Sometimes we fall down and hurt a knee, sometimes the path becomes too steep and we get exhausted. Sometimes we try to find other and hopefully easier paths, etc., etc. Yet during this process of walking the path we change, get developed in the midst of events in life, and the main purpose of these events is to make us develop our conscience and begin to think and act not solely for personal interests, but on behalf of the groups, communities, or nations walking the more or less same path besides us. It is obvious that even grouping or gathering for the selfish interests bring our abundant possibilities for the beings to experience the interactions with others, even if this is motivated by choices made from the earthly cravings or sensuality side of the conscience mechanism. Because, as all of us know very well, when we choose the path of earthly cravings or sensuality, we reap what we sow. That is, we live the consequences of this choice, and later, in order to transform all those arduous and suffering experiences, we attract more and more experiences and events into our life. And, at the communal level, as the current world population, we can think of the natural or man-made disasters. Economic crisis as such consequences, because these are not happening only in one place, or for only one nation, the whole humankind feels the effects of such events. And why? Because as the humankind, we need to awake our conscience, we need to learn our real needs, we need to break the hold of the things we are identified with so far. And these needs bring out new and harder tests and trials for all of us. Yet, the current state of human affairs is described in this last sentence of this passage. Apparently no one wants to see or think the original great values of all these constitutions that will lead mankind to the superior and real benefits. Because of this fact, as the entire humankind, we tend to remain asleep, not awaken, and due to this, we attract such automatic states of becoming driven by the influences sent from the beings in duty.
I just want to say that, this phrase, apparently no one, in this last sentence also implies that sometimes there are ones who want to see or think the original great values, yet they are not that apparent. That is, albeit in small numbers, there are persons who are not content with their current inner and outer states, and working hard to change, transform and develop those states.
Well, of course. For example, together with our dear friends joining us in this reading and commentary series, we are working to see what is behind the apparent or the visible within the frame, the knowledge given in the divine order and the universe. It does not mean that we can see it, no, but it means that we are spending efforts for becoming able to see it. Ours are baby steps, but even those small steps demand efforts. And the numbers of people who want to see, or of people who does not want to see. Well, it is better not too judgmental about appearances and numbers, because the carrot for each one of us tastes different and looks different. Still, I can happily say that, since the disclosure of this book, most readers' brains are on fire with questions, with disillusionments, with frustration, with awe, with wonder, etc. So there already have been many transformations and changes and developments in the matter combinations our beings are engaged with. And, because the effort we spend in this directions are so valuable, let me thank to our dear friends once again for their interest, support, attendance, questions, and comments. All right, let's continue reading. As everything else that exists in the world, constitutions of nation, state, and family are not the end but the means. True ends of these means are not the apparent material gains and realities of the world, which are very transitory and cannot be taken even as a speck to beyond the world, but to acquire essence knowledge which will emerge after many bitter and sweet events, which mankind will encounter as they say, "Let me live in this or that reality," or "run after this or that gain." Go through applications in the conscience mechanism. And at this point, we state once again the relation between the conscience mechanism and enrichment of essence knowledge. Now, we will repeat this knowledge as a summary, so in the comprehension there may be no dark and vague aspects regarding it. Well, before we read the summary in the next passage, it may be beneficial to remember what we had discussed with you last year about the essence knowledge while we were reading the passages on the death and after death.
Of course. Now, here there is a very important expression. The apparent material gains and realities of the world which are very transitory and cannot be taken even as a speck to beyond the world but to acquire essence knowledge which will emerge after many bitter and sweet events, which mankind will encounter as they say let me live in this or that reality or run after this or that gain, go through applications in the conscience mechanism. You know that old adage of Anatolia, the shroud has no pockets. We use this whenever we want to remind and remember that we can take nothing material along as we cross over to hereafter. This is out of question. Still, there are things we can take along, our intentions and deeds, and a much subtler and transformed form of the resulted impressions are being gained after evaluating the total knowledge and experiences we gained here in the world. So, we must really understand that we evaluate ourselves after death, not by the results of the events we encountered and made others to live those results. No, we evaluate ourselves by our intentions that motivated or drove us in those events and our conscientious states. Yes, I say we evaluate ourselves after death. This is what our being does. We are left alone with our own self in the spatium. That period is a total self-contemplation of our being. In life, in the hydrogen realm, we, as the corporeal or bodily representatives of our being, we are involved in, engaged with events, and consequently, via our brain and through the channel of our consciousness, we collect daily results of those events, our feelings and emotions related to those events in our unconscious, and transfer all those daily accumulation of data to our being, every night, during our sleep, just like a compressed zip file we use to send large documents over internet. And this recording continues in every moment of our life. And after death, this field of compressed data from our last lifetime gets activated, and the process of comparing these recent data with the previous data from our past lifetimes that already processed and sublimated into essence knowledge. And as the result of this comparison and synthesis, the transformed form of these most recent data from our last life becomes essence knowledge.
In the divine order and the universe, the term accounting is stated many times. And as you said, in this collected data file, there is all impressions of our choices and actions we made, either from the duty side or the earthly cravings, sensuality side of our conscience mechanism. And in this process of comparison, our being is in an isolated state called spatium, and in that state, we encounter and evaluate this data without any justifications, without any excuses, because our last personality and egoistical defense mechanisms vanish with the death of the body. So, this is a truly conscientious evaluation. This is what's called accounting in this book. And if there is, and most of the time, certainly, there is some unfinished business, some loose ends that we need to complete and conclude for the proper development of our being. Then, our being may need to build a new body for another lifetime in the world. And our being, with the assistance of the guiding beings and the beings in duty, makes a new life plan. And this life plan, even as an outline, needs to be interconnected with the beings that are already in body and that will be born. So, as we tried to do last week as we discussed personal and communal plans, please try to imagine the width and expanse of the communal plan that contains the life plans of its individuals. From this perspective, our life is so precious because, within a lifetime, our being has many possibilities to finish some unfinished business, to learn some lessons left unlearnt at the previous lifetimes. And because of this, we may understand the apparent chaos in the world as all beings try to finish and complete all those lessons before this last cycle of the world ends. And not only by personally experiencing those events, but also by observing as others experience those events, we learn. This is why the frequency, volume, density, and intensity of the events per time unit is increasing. In this sense, the more is. Maybe not the merrier, but the more enriching. Because of this, all human communities, small as a family or large as a nation, are very important. And we already read that the true purpose is not gathering humans as groups and communities, but all those interactions that happen among individuals which are very necessary for their conscience to become developed. Yes, let's continue reading. Conscience realities that are evaluated with world comprehension are not the essence knowledge of the being. These are appearances of the matter states, according to the necessities of the being's embodiments in crude matter, that display various forms within the duty-earthly craving duality. These realities do not necessarily follow the same sequence in everybody, they line up according to necessities and needs. And knowledge of comparison to be collected from the events that will arise as a result of the collision of these opposite components will increase the values of the being's essence knowledge, and these values will reflect to the spirit as its degree of evolution within comprehension formations. This situation briefly indicates the gist of the states of the ever-changing realities in the world at the conscience mechanism, and of the roles of all these mechanisms that enrich the essence knowledge, and finally, of the services the being renders for the evolution of the spirit. Likewise, these realities operate the conscience mechanism, as on the one hand they increase essence knowledge, and on the other hand, they can shift towards the higher realities by taking strength and speed from essence knowledge. That is, as the realities connected to the brain enrich the complexity of subtle matter combinations belonging to the comprehension in the essence being. Illumined lights reflected to the brain from the essence being convey the equilibria of conscience to the higher levels as well. Thus, as essence knowledge increases, tugs of conscience on the path of knowledge of duty increase the level of earthly cravings as well. And there comes a moment when the distance between duty and earthly cravings shortens close to the plan of duty, and it becomes easier for comprehension to orientate to the duty front, and when the plan of duty is reached, from that moment onwards, conscience duality is no more. Instead, another duality of evolution, that of a different quality and which advances with deeds of great duty, begins. And this duality follows the being up to the unitary.
We read here, as we just mentioned, the essence knowledge is not the conscience realities that are evaluated with world comprehension. Essence knowledge is much more encompassing. Here, this phrase, knowledge of comparison to be collected from the events that will arise as a result of the collision of these opposite components. In our previous videos, we had discussed that as every matter-particle and combination, our conscience reality has a dualistic structure, with two opposite components. One is called earthly cravings or sensuality. The other is the intuition of duty. And as we talk about the collision of these two components, we must bear in mind that the possible swinging between these two components is a right given to humankind. As a developmentary mechanism, its very primitive forms occur in plants and animals as automatisms and instincts. However, as a developmentary mechanism that contains free will in proportion to the level of a being's development, conscience is exclusive to human beings. You know, sometimes we say, this or that person is conscienceless. Yet, this is impossible because each human has this developmentary mechanism. Yes, as the beings enter the stage of human, they begin to live and experience realities related to the earthly cravings, to sensuality in and amidst cruder matter combinations. And if we take this mechanism as a vertical line, the point a human being is generally at in this line is closer to cruder earthly and sensual cravings component. And due to this free will or freedom of choice we humans have, as we live and experience the events in life, and as we have to make decisions and choices, these two opposite components within us collide all the time, and the side or component we make the decision from becomes the consequence of that decision or choice. And by noticing consequences of our actions that resulted from our decisions, we gain the knowledge of comparison. During a lifetime, we are not that aware of the knowledge of comparison we gain, because these, as we just said, are transferred to the unconscious via the channel of consciousness. The great accounting, as dear Tülin calls the process, occurs in the spatium state when this knowledge is compared with the previous essence knowledge, and again, in a much subtler form, reflected to the spirit via the channel of comprehension. Thus, the increase of the being's essence knowledge leads to the spirit's evolution. In this passage, another phrase strikes my attention. And there comes a moment when the distance between duty and earthly cravings shortens. Well, here, let me clarify a point that is frequently misunderstood. We must really accept that our task is not getting rid of the earthly cravings or sensuality component. No, the purpose of our bodily existence is to change states and forms of the earthly cravings, of the sensuality component. What does this mean? The initial state was a primitive human, preoccupied with bodily interests. In the following 60 or 70,000 years, humankind has passed through many realities, starting from cannibalism to our current realities. First, as individuals, then, as member of groups, family, nation, state etc. as an ever-widening circle. And during all those realities that have been completed, humans do not get rid of the earthly cravings but change and transform those cravings toward the intuition of duty, shifting the point in the line upwards. And, at the end of the passage, we read an important knowledge. When the plan of duty is reached, from that moment onwards, conscience duality is no more. Instead, another duality of evolution, that of a different quality and which advances with deeds of great duty begins. Yes, a veiled explanation. Yet, we must remember that duality is prevalent in the entirety of the matter universe, and only at the unitary, there is no duality because this is the unification point of all comprehensions in the universe. I am sure our dear friends remember the passages on duality at the earlier pages of this book. If they don't, let me urge you to watch the previous videos in this series, or to read those pages. Yes, in those earlier passages, we had read that duality is composed of two influences that support and complement each other, and both of these are a manifestation of the original influence which appears two-fronted in the universe, and its purpose was to bring out motion in matter. Without duality, we cannot talk about movement, motion, orientation, transition, transfers or exchange of influence. Let's go back to this phrase. When the plan of duty is reached, a superhuman state begins. Therefore the previous developmentary mechanism we call as duality also gets transformed or gets so much subtler that it gains a different quality to become as another duality of evolution.
For me, the most striking phrase is, as the realities connected to the brain enrich the complexity of subtle matter combinations belonging to the comprehension in the essence being. Illumined lights reflected to the brain from the essence being convey the equilibria of conscience to the higher levels as well. So, in every case, the function of our brain plays an important role in making up our current learning, which we can see in the examples of research results and discoveries in the field of neuroscience. We already read and discussed the new model of consciousness given in this book, so again, please watch our previous videos. We need to take care of our brain because all impressions of the events, and the thoughts and emotions related to these events we live within a given day, are to be transferred to our unconscious by our brain, by its related functions and centers. And these will be sorted, filtered, and processed by brain cells beings during our sleep. And as our daily consciousness remains inert and at rest, the other fields of consciousness are awake and working to transfer all those data to our being for the daily accounting. Sometimes, when we need some nudging toward the better options and choices, then related influences are sent to our consciousness, and our brain, the most successful content creator, brings out some visual and emotional material, and we say, "Wow, this dream was so impressive. It has a message." Of course, in the waking hours of a given day, our body's influence is greater on us. But with some certain practices, we can train our brain to have a stronger and more enduring connection to our being. And only then it becomes possible for us to combine the influences from our being regarding the communal evaluations with the individual choices. Well, as a habit, we say our choices, we assume we choose, but actually, the choices emerge from that perceptual point that is our essence being. Well, maybe later we can talk about this point in detail, but now let me continue reading. Mankind, which constitutes the most intense moments of this tug, especially at the middle stages of humanity, lives continuously in shifts of ease and uneasiness. These states correspond to the equilibrium and imbalance states of the conscience components that emerge distinctly. The ease puts the man into a state of satisfaction in accordance with his comprehension, so he sees himself in resolved problems. However, at the moment the equilibrium line of conscience starts to be disturbed at higher or lower levels, in accordance with the necessities and emerging needs of the essence being, he is annoyed. The feeling of his old reality is about to collapse in the face of a new reality that irritates him. This suffering increases with the degree of equilibrium's disruption. This situation takes on various contents and forms according to each cycle and level. Sometimes, especially at the less advanced stages, it manifests as real pangs of conscience. These types of pangs are seen more at equilibria's shifting downwards, in the advanced developmental stages of being. It is not these pangs but various states and forms of confusion that occur, and these are not least significant as uneasiness. All of these states of uneasiness or suffering conclude the equivalence of conscience realities at far higher levels, and consequently, the increase in essence knowledge and convergence of mankind towards the destined plans of duty. Therefore, man needs to reach the higher realities by trying to get over the confusions following the digested, fully functioned realities of the level he exists in as soon as possible, so that acquired merits can start to function timely, and consequently, the normal progress of the essence knowledge on the path of development can continue without cessation. So, when a man encounters any uneasiness or confusion or pangs, and when his conscience starts to burn with the sparks of any pangs, that man needs immediately to pull himself together and have his comprehension browse among the components of his conscience to orientate to the higher component of his conscience which he has neglected so far, to start sending values to it through his wishes, and on the other hand, to put his wishes, habits, desires belonging to the lower reality in the background, and not to feed them with values, and above all, to make the very necessary efforts to do this. As he does this, conscience equilibrium begins to be set gradually at higher levels, and when this happens, the joy of much greater ease and happiness to be born will sweep away all troubles and hardships of the past. Nevertheless, their knowledge in the essence being, as a rich charge of development, converges man closer to the sublime plans of evolution, and the increase of ease in man is actually the result of this state.
In this passage, we see this conflict between the concepts of ease and uneasiness. I think, as I do, you also hear this frequently asked question: how can we understand that the state we are in is suitable for us or not? There is a simple method for this. Just ask, in the state you are or with your action, do you feel ease? Or are there some doubts, some unease, some troubling thoughts? If we can ask and answer these questions with true sincerity, we can easily determine if the state, events, or action we are in is right or wrong for us. Now, all of us know that in every aspect of inner and outer life, of nature, of each and every reality, there is always a state of equilibrium. The problem with such states is that equilibrium cannot stay at the same level. Because of the duality principle, there is always a flux of values from one side to other, from negative to positive, from positive to negative, in short, from one component to the other component. And because of this, let's say the emotional state of conscience of a person cannot stay at the same level of equilibrium, and this brings out uneasiness. Well, we humans tend to stay inert, yes, be it material or inner comfort, any state we get familiar with becomes a comfort zone for us, and we don't want it to change. However, what is the purpose of spirits getting experience in the matter universe? Encountering ever new states by the disruption of the states of equilibrium, states of balance. Therefore, we cannot avoid this fact, we cannot escape this fact. All states are transitory, their balance will be disrupted and instead, new states of equilibrium will be established. That is why we read in this passage. Especially at the less advanced stages, it manifests as real pangs of conscience. These types of pangs are seen more at equilibria's shifting downwards. In the advanced developmental stages of being, it is not these pangs but various states and forms of confusion that occur, and these are not least significant as uneasiness. Well, let's take this crude example. A person hurts or kills another person will feel pangs of conscience as the result of the disruption of his crude or low state of conscience equilibrium. But a person who couldn't finish a task he is responsible for may not feel such deep pangs of conscience but a deep inner uneasiness. These examples are clear enough to not to mix them. Well, at the end of this passage, there is the answer to one of the most frequently asked questions by our dear friends. What should we do to be evolved, or how can we use the knowledge given in this book? Well, this is the answer. If you like, you can consider this as a shortcut. Let me read. So, when a man encounters any uneasiness or confusion or pangs, and when his conscience starts to burn with the sparks of any pangs, that man needs immediately to pull himself together and have his comprehension browse among the components of his conscience, to orientate to the higher component of his conscience which he has neglected so far, to start sending values to it through his wishes, and on the other hand, to put his wishes, habits, desires belonging to the lower reality in the background and not to feed them with values, and above all, to make the very necessary efforts to do this. The clearest and most succinct knowledge all of us must apply in every moment of our life. Again, another phrase I'd like to underline is, their knowledge in the essence being, as a rich charge of development, converges man closer to the sublime plans of evolution, and the increase of ease in man is actually the result of this state. So, the true ease becomes more apparent as we get closer to the higher plans, to plans of duty, and assumes a new form. Again, we have to remember that all experiences we had, have, and will have is for preparing and carrying us toward the plans of duty where we can receive these high-level knowledge more intensely, within a much subtler time comprehension. And as we get closer to these plans, our feeling of ease increases. Yet, this is not the feeling of peace or ease we can have while we are spending some quality time in a forest, by seaside, etc. This feeling is due to distancing ourselves, even for a brief time period, from the hustle and bustle of daily life and the inner chaos of the unresolved problems and troubles. Therefore, the inner ease this book mentions is different.
When we look at the general state of the humankind, we see that this general state is shaped mainly by external conditions and internal conditions. As to external conditions, well, by following all those immense calculations of time and space conjunctions by the destiny cadres in duty, we are born to a mother and a father, to a family and community, and starting from the moment of our birth, we begin to receive a non-stop flow of information and influence from the country, city, town, neighborhood we live in through events and experiences we have. And when we have ease or uneasiness, happiness or unhappiness, These inner states are rather depending on our inner conditions because, in general, we are not in control of external conditions. I mean, we cannot change or direct external conditions to our liking. Yet, we can change and transform our inner conditions. It looks like the middle age period of an individual and the middle part of the human stage for entire humankind almost similar. Because the conscientious appearances and the added values as meanings of things we run after between adolescence and age 30 to 35 becomes gradually different after age 40 and on. The inner ease and peace become more valuable as we mature by the influences and experiences we had as time goes by. The meanings we ascribe to events, or to things we own, or to life in general change, and in accordance with, our inner conditions change, mature. We can begin to feel the initial signs of that ease you mentioned, only if we really think and work and spend efforts on this issue, maybe by asking such questions to ourselves. Why do I always live similar events? Why do I attract such similar events or troubles? When some initial awareness or comprehension begins to emerge related to these questions, then, depending on the ratio of crude sensuality or earthly cravings in our usual states of equilibrium, we may feel pangs of conscience at worst and uneasiness at best. And this is good because this is a sign that we started seeing the consequences of our actions. As we try to grasp and understand the cause and effect chain behind the consequences and results we brought out on other beings, in proportion to our awareness about our actions which are not encompassing, not directed to the whole, to the conscience we feel remorse. And this means that these small awakenings widen our comprehension about our own self. Because, if people have no comprehension or awareness about the consequences of their actions, they don't feel such pangs of conscience or uneasiness. In Anatolian culture, such people are described as their conscience is veiled. This saying implies that people have the conscience, but because it is veiled or obscured, the substance can become gradually apparent and functional. Yes, the freedom of choice between duty and sensuality is given to humankind as a right. Yet, meeting and living the consequences of their choices are given as a comparison tool. When we become able to compare the quality of the choice that we make with the consequences we live because of that choice, then we can stop acting as we did so far. As the old adage goes, if your mouth is burned by hot milk, you blow before you eat yogurt. Yes, at first this may be automatically, burning ourselves by the choices that led suffering consequences. Later, as our awareness and comprehension increase, we start acting more consciously. And this is what brings the inner peace and ease. This state of ease contains the learning all lessons that need to be learnt, and the awakening that follows such knowing. Gradually, as we consciously advance on our path, the steps we take will shift from semi-comprehending to more or less comprehending. And then, within our inner conditions, we can reach a state of ease due to our actions regardless the external conditions. Yes, dear Tümerhan, we made a good start of our weeks together in this series. Thank you for your ideas and comments. Hoping to see you all next week, dear friends. Have a good week.
Good evening, everyone. See you next week.